turnout on 3news.com. I am Alfred Okanse. Tonight, we scrutinize the plausibility and feasibility of former President John Dramani Mahama's campaign promises already as his bid to make a comeback to the presidency begins. A possible scrap of Article 71 and many others. Stay with us. We'll get into it. Also, the Nigerian elections may be over at the polling stations, but its legitimacy may be contested in court as some disgruntled parties have already served notice they are taking a legal route. We have it all on the show tonight, as we'll be joined later on the show from Lagos. The official spokesperson for the Labour Party is going to be joining us, because today we're getting to know that Peter Obi has decided to challenge the presidential results at the Supreme Court. Will the Supreme Court or the judiciary deliver the justice that they expect? Stay with me. We're getting to all of that here on Ghana Tonight. But first, let's settle for Ghana Briefs. Some leading members of the National Democratic Congress have described it as reassuring President Mahama's address to the nation at the launch of his campaign to contest the flag-bearer race of the party and subsequently the presidency of the country.
Inspiring speech, very gracious, very visionary, very unifying. You can tell that President Mahama is reflected, he's poised, and he's returning to rebuild, to reconstruct, to rediscover, and to reunite this country. I mean, this is a country in total shambles. We are in tatters.
Comrades who want to contest John Dramani Mahama, I would say that support him to win the coming elections, and then after he's done his term, we will consider embracing you and giving you the opportunity to run this country. But until that is done, I think that it will be an exercise in futility.
Private legal practitioner and law lecturer Justice Abdullahi has said it will be tough to get rid of Article 71 of the 1992 Constitution in the manner promised by former President John Dramani Mahama. Though he believes it is a good thing to scrap ex gratia, the law may be a challenge.
All the things about ex gratia, in fact, the entire emolument of the executive and indeed the legislature and then other senior government officials who are all captured under Article 71 are persons whose emoluments are not determined necessarily by the president. They are determined by the Constitution. And so for President Mahama to say that he will scratch it, for me, is a blessing, it's a good news. But there's a genuine caveat here. It's a very tough call. It's not something that can easily be done.
The majority leader, Oseche Mensah Bonsu, has taken a swipe at the minority group in Parliament, questioning its opposition to the intention of the Electoral Commission to use the Ghana card as the sole document for voter registration. The majority leader insists the National Identification Authority system used for registering the Ghana card is more robust than that of the Electoral Commission.
The Electoral Commission is saying that they admit that their own system is not foolproof. This is a much robust system. And so we want to, as the law provides, align ourselves so that moving forward, we sanitize the system and also ensure that the fraud in the system would be eliminated.
More than 1,000 nurses and midwives have left the country to seek greener pasture in Europe and elsewhere in the last 2 months. President of the Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwives Association, Perpetual Foriampofo, tells TV3 many more would leave if their conditions of service are not improved.
Based on the loans that we are given, we have realized a lot of our members take loans from various places just to make ends meet. So they are paying loans in several places. And so at any point in time, they are cash strapped. So if they can go out there and work and look at the exchange rate now, and they can remit some money home, and it can translate into so much, why won't they leave?
Scores of young Nigerians throng the Transcorp Hilton Hotel in Abuja, uninvited to a press briefing by the Labour Party's Peter Obi chanting, "He is our president." The youth say no matter the outcome of the election petition, the celebrated presidential candidate remains their choice forever.
He's the right candidate, actually.
He is our president, definitely. He is our president, and we will get our mandate back. There's no two ways about it. He must get his mandate back, and we will get it back, definitely.
Will reduce significantly the size of government. And as announced in my speech at the UPSA late last year, in a crisis situation like this, it is my belief that this country can be governed efficiently with 60 ministers and deputy ministers. We will initiate and undertake the most far-reaching constitutional, political and governance reforms under the Fourth Republic, which will be aimed at restoring confidence in our democracy and governance systems while making life easier and better for the people of Ghana. In response to the concerns and calls from many of you, we will initiate and undertake the most far-reaching constitutional, political and governance reforms.
Also, that's the former president there. There are a number of key issues that he talked about earlier today during the launch of his campaign in Ho. Now, just take a look at this. Apart from what you have heard, restoring the stability and inclusive growth of the economy, the enforcement of prudent and responsible management of public finances, also restoring faith in the financial system is going to be on the screen shortly. And we talk about the restoration of faith in the financial system and the sweeping reforms at the Bank of Ghana. It's talking about sweeping response and also some reforms that we have put in there at the Bank of Ghana. And it's quite instructive because of what's happening now and what the financial sector in this country is going through because of a number of issues after the financial sector cleanup, and then also what we've seen now with the domestic debt exchange program. So we've got to get details of the sweeping reforms at the Bank of Ghana that we're going to expect from John Mahama going forward. A bit more detail into the strategic investment to generate jobs for the youth. Also talks about operate the leanest but most efficient government. That's where he mentions the 60 ministers in there and undertake constitutional, political and governance reform, scrap payment of ex gratia to executive members under Article 71, allow students to apply for senior high school after they receive their BEC results. Stay with me here on Ghana Tonight. We're going to be engaging a number of experts on this, especially the educationists. They're going to be joining us to find their thoughts on the last one, the point 8, as to how this is going to address the issues of corruption and the unfairness in this school placement system to senior high schools, as we have seen over the period, and whether this is also going to deal with the protocol system, the protocol that emanates from all students, church leaders, traditional leaders in various traditional areas where these schools are located, and then also the quota system. All of this, whether this point 8 is going to deal with that. But the point 5, which is operating the leanest but efficient government. Question is, are the NDC members going to support John Mahama to get this promise fulfilled, to save us all? I mean, some money, regardless of the political cost of they not benefiting from appointments as presidential staffers and ministers and deputy ministers and other appointments, so that government expenditure will be reduced to send the right signal to all of us that if we're called upon to make the sacrifices, we know government is leading the process of doing so. Look, let's face it, politics It's about interests. So the NDC wants to do differently from what this current administration is doing. Their members should also be ready not to put pressure on John Mahama if they win 2024, that is, to create all sorts of ridiculous portfolios, all because of job for the boys or reward for supporting him or working to get him into power. That is, if they win 2024 eventually. So that is the critical question that you have some political analysts asking. Because, you know, take a look at this. We've seen some ridiculous portfolios that sometimes you think about it, and we are the people who are paying for all of this. Look, earlier, the Member of Parliament for the North Tongue constituency, Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, put this out. Policy and coordinator analyst, focal person, La Francophonie, technical director, La Francophonie, coordinator, special development initiative, secretariat, director of special projects. And this is at your cost, by the way. Manager of operations and programs, 5 technical communication assistants, technical advisor, Zongo Development Authority, 2 technical advisors, special development initiative secretariat, technical advisor, political affairs. As if that's not enough. That's what Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa put out earlier. Presidential staffer, NABCO, office management executive associate, technical director for the president, advisor on media, data manager, and all of that. You see also the coordinator for the National Cathedral. They are all there, right? Because you see, 2024 is not going to be business as usual, when politicians will come and say what they think the people should hear in order to vote for them. When this list was put out by Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa about these ridiculous portfolios, the presidency also put out a list in which some members of parliament, the majority in parliament, corroborated. Because this went before parliament. They said there's a total of 995 presidential staffers. They gave the breakdown as this. Minister of State at the presidency, when Charles Eduboahin was sacked, we thought that, look, it was going to be a good signal not replacing him. That, well, the president didn't listen. He's been replaced. Presidential staffers, 45. Other political appointees, 291. Whatever that means. See? Public sector employees, 658. Right? You have Minister of State at the presidency. Then you have also, as indicated here, in the total of 995. Question is, can we support this size and expenditure of government in this crisis? Let's assume that this number is what we're going with. The other thing that John Mahama talked about is the scrapping of the ex gratia to Article 71 office holders. Lawyer Martin Kpebu is going to be joining us right after this, because this is an entrenched clause in the 1992 Constitution. So other lawyers think that it's going to be difficult. Other lawyers believe that it's going to be easy. We will find out what process has to be fulfilled for an entrenched clause to be scrapped, as the president, indeed, that's the former president, John Mahama, is promising to do, so that we can all have an understanding of the feasibility and the plausibility of this promise. Stay with me. We'll be back shortly after this quick break.
Will reduce significantly the size of government. And as announced in my speech at the UPSA late last year, in a crisis situation like this, it is my belief that this country can be governed efficiently with 60 ministers and deputy ministers. We will initiate and undertake the most far-reaching constitutional, political, and governance reforms under the Fourth Republic, which will be aimed at restoring confidence in our democracy and governance systems while making life easier and better for the people of Ghana. In response to the concerns and calls from many of you, we will initiate and undertake the most far-reaching constitutional, political, and governance reforms that will restore confidence in our democracy. We will continue and bring to conclusion the constitutional review process that was begun by the late President Atta Mills, which will include a review of the controversial Article 71 to reduce the number of office holders under Article 71 and reduce the disparities in privileges and emoluments vis-à-vis the public sector and civil service. The payment of ex gratia to members of the executive under Article 71 will be scrapped. And the necessary constitutional steps to abolish that payment will start in earnest in 2025. We will also begin the process of persuading the other arms of government other than the executive to accept the removal of these ex gratia payments.
The former president launching his campaign, and we understand he's hit the ground running already now in parts of the Volta region. But this particular promise to scrap the ex-gratia, we're going to get into the 60 ministers, the size of government he intends to work with. We'll get into that, and the reactions already coming in. But this one, the Article 71 of the 1992 Constitution, many people, not just him, have called for it to be scrapped because it's not serving the purpose of advancing this democracy, right? But take a look at this. This is what the Constitution says, okay? The specific provision and the detail. Because question is, if it is an entrenched clause, what has to be done? And you heard the former president talk about consulting the other arms of government before a decision to do this, because Article 71(2) of the 1992 Constitution, this says the salaries and allowances payable, this is the 71(2). That's it. 5 persons appointed by the president, acting in accordance with the advice of the Council of State. The salaries and allowances payable and the facilities available to the president, the vice president, the chairman and other members of the Council of State, ministers of state, deputy ministers, being expenditure charged on the consolidated fund, shall be determined by Parliament on the recommendations of the committee referred to in clause of this one of this article, which is the Emoluments Committee, which we've seen over the period. Now, so when John Mahama talks about the executive scrapping the ex gratia for the executive, which is within his powers to do so as head of the executive arm of government, this is what he's talking about. But take a look at Article 7. Article 7, in fact, it's actually more than just the ex gratia for the executive. Let's look at this. This is where the judiciary and also the legislative arm of government, can that power be extended to, for instance, scrapping the ex gratia for members of parliament and the speaker, or the chief justice and the speaker? That's where it talks about the consultation. So what process or what path will John Mahama take to fulfill this promise to the Ghanaian people? There are divided opinions, even amongst lawyers, on this. Take a listen to Justice Abdullahi. He's a private legal practitioner, as to whether this is going to be easy or feasible. Take a look.
Scrapping ex gratia will be very difficult. First, because my understanding of Article 71 is that all the things about ex gratia, in fact, the entire emolument of the executive and indeed the legislature and then other senior government officials who are all captured under Article 71 are persons whose emoluments are not determined necessarily by the president. They are determined by the Constitution. And so for President Mahama to say that he was scratch it, for me, is a blessing, it's a good news. But there's a genuine caveat here. It's a very tough call It's not something that can easily be done. This is not a decision that is made by Parliament. It's not like any other law that Parliament can simply go into caucus meetings and come out and then say that, voila, we've amended the provisions of the Constitution with the Attorney General's involvement and all of that, and so it is a law. Nope. For all of us who have hopes in this happening, we should be measured in our hopes. Not that the man may not do it, but because it is tough, because it is captured under the entrenched provisions of the Constitution, which makes it very difficult to be removed. It means that you have to go through the amendment of the entire Constitution.
Council, granted that it is something difficult to do, and what will it take for the former President Mahama?
Yes, Justice Abdullahi says it's difficult, even though he applauds the former president for this. In fact, when we put out a poll earlier, 98% of the respondents said this ex-gratia should be scrapped. So is it really difficult? Let's seek another legal opinion, okay? Just to have a balanced view. Lawyer Martin Pebo is joining us on Zoom. So, Lawyer Martin Pebo, thank you so much, as always, for joining us on Ghana Tonight. This is an entrenched clause, Article 71, correct? So what process would John Mahama have to fulfill to scrap the ex gratia, as many Ghanaians are calling for?
Yes, Article 71 is an entrenched clause because the Constitution says so. The Constitution says so in Article 290. Yes, that's what the Constitution says. Maybe, okay, we can refer to it. Article 290, that's 290 plus 1, lists the clauses that are entrenched. And one of them is Article 71, because 71 falls under the executive. That's Chapter 8. Yes. So to the extent that 71 is part of Chapter 8, it's squarely within the entrenched clauses. And when we say entrenched, so meaning that
we're not seeing your video. I don't know if you can put your video on.
We would have to go through a referendum. I mean, there are other processes, but the reason we like to mention referendum is that then it will be clear to everybody dealing with it the enormous task ahead. So that's the whole thing. So anything from Article 57, the beginning of executive, up to Article 88, that's the Attorney General, is also what do you call it? Entrenched. So should we go through the processes, or that's a different question?
Indeed, we've got to go through the process, because how long, as you've established that this is an entrenched clause, your colleague lawyer makes the point that it's going to be difficult because the emoluments of the other arms of government are determined by the Constitution. How long will the process take if it will take a referendum to actually have John Mahama fulfill this promise to the Ghanaian people?
Wow. It could take, it's not going to take less than a year at all. The reason I'll say it can't take less than a year is that even in terms of the parliamentary procedure, so we are not talking about a step-by-step approach, but I'm just using a few provisions to illustrate why it cannot take less than a year. Number one, you say when you're going to a referendum, you are going to have to educate the masses, right? And the reason we must go through a referendum is that it's so stated in Article 290, Clause 4, that there must be a referendum. We'll come to the percentages. But as soon as you say there's going to be a referendum, practically you must educate people. And so going to educate people will take months. You see, you have to do adverts and all that, try to educate, have more town hall meetings, so many things. And then now you come to 290 Clause 3 itself. Under Clause 3, it says that when the bill, that's the document that is going to contain the amendments, that's going to be used for the amendment, is published in the Gazette. And when we say Gazette, that is the official facility that they let official documents pass through, right, so that people can access The Gazette is used for other purposes, but I'm talking about this specific purpose. So it's published there. So when it's published there, you can go and get a copy. The common way of identifying the Gazette is that usually they do it at the Assembly Press, which is next to Accra Polytechnic. Yes, they share a boundary. Yeah, you go there. So that's where you would find that things have been published in the Gazette. You can get copies, right?
Right.
So the point I'm making is that it must be published for 6 months. It says that Parliament should not touch the bill unless it's been published for at least 6 months. So 6 months will have to pass before Parliament to touch it. And then also, the Council of State, the Speaker has to refer this same bill to the Council of State, and the Council of State must give its advice within 30 days. You say, so It can be on the 30th day. And don't forget, once they hand it back, that's when they take their advice back to Parliament. Sometimes it may take a few days before the Speaker can look at it. So even going by the provisions alone, I've already shown that in Article 290, Clause 3, you require 6 months for it to be a public, and also to allow people to access it. Then 290, Clause 2, Council of State has 30 days to advise. So there's 6 months plus the 1 month. You are getting 7. And then I'm saying that Parliament itself, don't forget there are processes within Parliament. You know, they will do first reading, second reading, consideration, all those things. So you see why this cannot take less than a year. And of course, we started with the advice that had to be given to the education that has to be given to the populace. We need to be educated on why we should amend and all that. Okay. So this is a business that cannot be conducted in less than a year. So you say that if the president is committed to this, or that is John Mahama is committed to this, if he eventually is elected flag bearer and the NDC wins 2024, it shouldn't take less than a year to fulfill this promise. But how about the engagement? Because he indicated that, in fact, he acknowledges he cannot extend this to the judiciary and the legislature without engaging the heads of those arms of government, talking about the Chief Justice and the Speaker of Parliament. I mean, can that also possibly prolong the process of engagement and eventually fulfillment of this promise? No, I don't see how he can do it. Because it is a constitutional provision and that's the process. You must go through the process. So the president, if he were to do it without going through the Council of State, that would be unconstitutional. I don't even think that we would allow that to happen. It must go through due process. Yes, they can do it very fast. As I said, yes, so depending on the speed. Yes, it's just I'm being practical that at least a year, okay, because you need to. And don't forget, you see, we haven't mentioned one of the things that under Article 290, Clause 4, you need at least 40% of the people who are entitled and qualified to vote to turn up. So voter turnout must be at least 40%. And out of the 40%, 75% of those who vote must vote yes for the amendment. That's a tall order. 40% must turn out. And then out of that turnout, when you count ballots counted, at least 75% must say yes. So that's a lot of work. So it's going to be campaigning like the way we campaign for the presidential elections, etc. So that's why I said practically it's a lot of work. And so let me quickly add also that we can't go into a referendum for just that one alone. There are other problems, and most especially the one about making sure Article 78 that we should no longer have ministers, also MPs doubling up as ministers. No, we have to decouple them so that ministers will be full-time ministers, MPs will be full-time ministers. That is one of the provisions, the leading provisions that have to be amended. So all I'm saying is that basically we cannot go to a referendum for just the Article 71 holders alone. We have to add a few others. Of course, I know some other people have raised the issue of adding too many onto one referendum and the rest. Yes, that debate is there, but I think generally, considering our economic circumstances, we'll have to load a few, a certain number, reasonable number into one referendum so that we can get some good value for money. Yes, but that exercise must be done. So once there's that promise, I understand this is not the first time we've heard this promise. So we are hoping that this time, well, that is if the one I heard, I don't know if you are referring to the same, but the one I heard today is from JM, Mr. John Mahama. I understand that's not the first time. So we are hoping that if this is not the first time, then if someday he has the opportunity, he has to walk this talk. We don't want this trajectory of failed promises like what we are seeing under President Akufo-Addo. Okay.
Lawyer Martin Bebo, indeed, you're right. This is not the first time he said this. I think he said this the first time in May 2015. So this is more, and he made the point about fulfilling or completing that process, which the late J.E.A. Mills started in reviewing the Constitution. So you're right about that, that this is not the first time. John Mahama himself has made this comment about scrapping ex gratia. Now, but I thank you very much. I mean, if you talk about the referendum and the number of people who have to turn up, 40%, 75% of the 40% will have to vote yes. I think that even with the polls that we put out, 98 respondents saying they want this ex gratia scrapped, Article 71 scrapped, then it wouldn't be too much of work for any president who wants to get this done, because the people themselves want it. We'll see how the days ahead of us will look like. Lawyer Martin Bebo, thank you for your thoughts on Ghana Tonight. He's a private legal practitioner, he's a constitutional lawyer as well. But let's remind ourselves again what John Mahama said about the size of government and the number of ministers he intends to work with. Take a look.
Will reduce significantly the size of government. And as announced in my speech at the UPSA late last year, in a crisis situation like this, it is my belief that this country can be governed efficiently with 60 ministers and deputy ministers.
That's the president. I mean, when I sat with him in that exclusive interview, he made this point, but now he's put a number to it. 60 ministers and deputy ministers. Dr. Sasanti is a senior political science lecturer at the University of Ghana, Legon Political Science Department. Thank you so much, Dr. Sasanti, for joining us on Ghana Tonight. I mean, the former president is making this statement, taking into consideration the state of the economy, knowing that this crisis will linger beyond 2024, regardless of the political cost of not fulfilling the expectations of the people who would vote for him or support him to be awarded with appointments. Is there any political cost to this?
Oh, Alfred, thanks for the opportunity. I'm not sure there is a political cost so much to the party. The policies are solutions to future problems. All right. Mm-hmm. So if your party want to stay in power, they need to come with very good policies that will stand the test of time. This issue of large government size has been a concern to many people, including they themselves within the NDC. So if their leader says that if he's given the nod, this is what you're going to work at, they must be grateful that the leader has mastered courage to deal with a problem that has over the years been lingering on. All right. This problem governments have shied away from. And if you have a leader who said that the time is now, I think they must be grateful to such a leader to do that. It is true that as party apparatchiks, they will want to expect some, appointment opportunities and all that. But that can also be gained in other sectors of governance, not necessarily being a minister, because there are always a lot of room for improvement. So I think The cost is obviously is there, but they can deal with that by also giving other appointments to them.
Saying that they can deal with that by giving other appointments to those who are going to be disappointed for John Mahama fulfilling the promise of running 60 ministers and deputy ministers. Would that also not increase the expenditure to government? That is your point about he satisfying them by giving them other appointments. Because essentially, that is the objective of reducing the size of government to 60 ministers is to reduce the expenditure.
It depends upon the type of appointment. If you are given a ministerial appointment, look at the perks associated with it and look at other conditions of service than say you are a government rep to a board which is constituted by law that it needs about 3 people and you are there. All right. Obviously, that position will be filled. So if they put you there, it's the same thing. But that is not going to increase the bail of government, because if the board, they say board A, you need 3 people, and you move the people from ministerial, you would have given them ministerial position, but because of what you have said, now I'm taking them to the board. What it tells you is that the number of people will be, reduced, and that whether parties like it or not, that is the reality they must face, and that the cost is there, but there is a collateral damage if you refuse to honor the promise that you have said. And that when they weigh the two, I think they will prefer the latter, which has latter consequences, than the one with serious negative effect that will undermine the fortunes of the party.
I see. I mean, but you know what? We've heard or seen other people in opposition make this same promise of running a lean government. It's either they come to power and they are hit with the reality and then they apologize for it, or like the current president, when we asked him, in fact, one of the few encounters with the media, he said that the mess he came to meet is so huge, he needs enough hands to deal with it. I mean, how should the Ghanaian people hold John Mahama to this promise if eventually he wins the flag bearership and the presidency?
What we have to do is to make sure that what he has said will also be put into the manifesto. It is the manifesto, which is the policy of government. Even though what he has said, he can't run away with, but it becomes more pronounced when it's in the manifesto. And that as part of the duties of Parliament, remember there's a committee in Parliament called Government Assurance Committee. Then they will take it up there, and then the public will also ensure that it works. That is the way to go. But if we leave them like that, to say it for saying sake, they can run away from it without we knowing. But if it's in the manifesto, we can pinpoint that is here, line, paragraph so, line so, and that you need to fulfill that. Else, don't come to us to renew your mandate. We'll throw you away. Let us use political our power to vote as, the most effective tool to right these wrongs. More often than not, we glorify politicians. They say things, we allow them to have a feel, they run away from it, and we can't hold them to task simply because some of these things are not documented. They are said, even though it is as important as if it is documented, but because of the transient nature of speech, all right, they are able to get away with murder. But if we ask them to put them into the manifesto, if we want to take them seriously, then the story will be different, and they will think twice when they are coming out with policies like that.
I see. But you get a sense of what the focal point of his message will be, is it not? Experience and not experiment. How is this going to work for him?
Oh, definitely. Even a side message, there are a lot of things that put those people behind him. in terms of, one, his experience. In terms of politics, he has more experience than any of them. Having been an MP before, a minister, a vice president, and a president. In terms of political experience, he has seen it all. None of them can match his competence. That aside, in politics, we are talking about contest of ideas as well as what referendum of your work. The work we are talking about is the record of the party, and you can get it from three areas: from what Rawlings bequeathed to the party, that of Professor Mills, and exactly what John also left. If John himself is contesting, where are they going to fall on in terms of record to campaign on? They will be just parasites on his work, or at best, they will be what, squatters, all right? Remember that anybody who has been put in any position by a government, you are just an errand boy of the president. So whatever success you chalk there, it is assumed the policy direction, initiative, everything comes from the president. So the byproduct, which you want to hold on as your property, obviously has a source and it can be credited to you. So all put together, I have no doubt in my mind that they want to contest. There's nothing wrong with that. In a democracy, everybody who is qualified by law can stand for election and be voted for. But the stark reality will dawn on them when the vote begin to trickle in, and that they will know that they are competing with a giant. I have no doubt in my mind that they will lose.
Okay. Dr. Sasanti, thank you so much for your time here on Ghana Tonight. He is a senior political science lecturer at the University of Ghana Political Science Department. Dr. Sasanti, thank you so much. This is Ghana Tonight. We're live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279 all across the world on 3news.com. Stay with us in subsequent days and subsequent other programs. We're going to be subjecting a number of things that John Mahama has said, which clearly indicates the direction of his campaign to a lot more conversation, and also for you, the Ghanaian people, to have a clear idea of the feasibility of these statements, and so we have all understanding. But let's go to Nigeria briefly, because scores of young Nigerians thronged the Transcorp Hilton Hotel in Abuja, uninvited, in fact, to a press briefing by the Labour Party's Peter Obi, chanting that he, for the youth there, they see him as their president. The youth say that no matter the outcome of the election petition, the celebrated presidential candidate of the Labour Party will remain their choice. Take a look.
I'm not going to vote again. I'm not going to challenge anybody. I'm not going to vote again.
There is enthusiasm on the part of Nigerians to vote. There is also an equal determination on the part of the Commission to ensure that the votes count.
I think the problem is coming from, the beavers.
INEC is colluding with the APC to defraud Nigerians.
Does it mean that where PDP and Labour Party won, the election was free and fair?
INEC chairman, you must step down.
If you are tired, just go and get retired in your farm.
Tinubu Bola Ahmed of the APC, having satisfied the requirements of the law, is hereby declared the winner.
This election has been ringing. This is a ringing election.
You voted and struggled for a better Nigeria.
He's the right candidate, actually.
Your president, what do you make of him?
He is our president, definitely. He is our president, and we will get our mandate back. There's no two ways about it. He must get his mandate back. And we'll get it back, definitely.
Let me tell you one thing. A man that is loved, you don't need to be told if he's loved or not. The reaction from the people, the reaction from Nigerians, you can actually see that if he is loved or not. You understand?
Dr. Many times. So that's over there, the press conference that he had here at the Transcorp Hilton Hotel in Abuja, thronged by so many young people who still have tremendous support for him. They still think that he's the man worth it to be the first gentleman of the land I mean, he's struggling to even have access into the elevator. You can see it, and he's still confident, but now he's made his way out, and the people still feel he's the man of the moment. Komla Kluchev, TV3 News, Abuja.
Oh, so that's my colleague. He is still in Abuja, Komla Kluchev, for us here on your election command center for the post-election in Nigeria reactions. But one of the front runners in the just ended election, whom you just saw there, Peter Obi, has served notice. He's heading to the Supreme Court to contest the election results. He held a press conference earlier today.
When I made my general comments, if you recall, I did ask for people to go about peacefully. And since after that election, I have never done anything to show that I don't want peace. I believe in a very peaceful Nigeria. I've had several phone calls where I asked people to remain calm and peaceful. That has nothing to do with what I'm challenging. I'm challenging the process. If the process is faulty, it's faulty. In fact, you can't build peace on a faulty foundation. It's never happened to anyone in the world. You have to the foundation has to be right for peace to prevail. And that is what the foundation is, what I'm challenging. I can tell you, nobody will ever put me under pressure when I challenge misconduct, rascality, or illegal process. Because it's not about it's not about, you can't, how do you put the person who is doing kidnapping under pressure? We're challenging what is wrong. It is not about me, it's not about you, it's about the society our children will live in.
So that's Peter Obi there. He came in third. In fact, he set out to upset the establishment of PDP and APC in Nigeria. But let's go straight to Lagos now. Dele Farotimi is Nigeria-based. Says he's a retired lawyer because he doesn't believe in the judicial system there. And he's a writer who associates with the Labour Party, whose presidential candidate you just heard. He also speaks for the Labour Party as well. Dele Farotimi, thank you so much for joining us on Ghana Tonight. So first off, we've seen how things have played out. The outcome serve the Nigerian people as being free, fair, transparent election, from what you saw?
The one thing that did not happen was that we had an election. We, the people, went out in record numbers to vote. The state, represented by the many rulers of Nigeria in the different localities where there are principalities and powers, made sure they did their best to make sure that we wouldn't vote. But in spite of their best efforts, we voted in record numbers. However, INEC has assured that our votes were not counted. And everything that they have reeled out, the numbers that they have reeled out are just exactly that, numbers, abracadabra, nothing more than that. It is not a reflection of what took place in the polling units. And INEC made sure that the only thing that happened was that the impunity of the ruling class prevailed because it lent itself as an instrument of fraudulence. We did not have an election in Nigeria on the 25th of February. Our expression of our rights were not reflected by what are being called out as results. So that's the long and short of it. And there are sufficient evidences in the public space. The vote numbers were depressed. There were voters' repression across the length and breadth of Nigeria. I can speak to the ones that took place in the state in which I live and vote. That's Lagos State. It was widespread. There were several parts of this state where certain ethnic groups were not allowed to be free to express their political will. Election presumes choice. Every election is about choice. The one thing that did not happen was that our choices be reflected by the results being announced by INEC. And it made sure that it did not observe any of its own rules because it was prepared to subvert the will of the people. So the one thing that you cannot validly claim happened in Nigeria on Saturday is an election. We voted in record numbers. The electoral umpire, fraudulent in the extreme, reeled out figures at variance, complete variance with what happened in the field. So you can't call that an election. And I think there are sufficient evidences in the public space to buttress the point I have made. We did not have.
I say, Dele, so you talk consistently about Nigerians going out in record numbers to vote, but the official numbers show a low voter turnout, at least as compared to 2019, where there was about 35% turnout. This time we're seeing between 28 and 29%. So what was the situation on the ground that you saw?
Look, the only thing that you can take as a fact is the fraudulence of everything that is coming out of our electoral umpire, INEC. Everything that is coming out of that commission, everything emanates from one lie or the other. The first of the lies, which is the basic, the most fundamental of the lies, from which every other lie proceeds, is the hypothesis that we had an election in Lagos or any other part of Nigeria. On Saturday, we did not have an election. We voted. But everything else, after that, INEC decided what it wanted to do. When it now talks to numbers, the reality is we couldn't possibly have a situation where people were voting up until 8:30 in the evening, like my wife did, in my own polling booth, and where they were counting votes up until 1:43 a.m. And then you are saying that there was a low, record low.
I see. Dele, I'm losing you there, but then again, some of the lawyers, I mean, Nigerian lawyers we've been speaking to on this show over the last few days gone by, and this is the third and final question to you. Some of the lawyers actually make the point that even though they actually agree, they admit that there were infractions of the electoral laws, but they argue that it is not enough to have warranted the cancellation of the results and the illegitimacy of the outcome.
The first thing that was lost in my country was justice. It was after justice was lost that Nigeria began its journey to putrefaction. Ordinarily, anywhere in the world, if you place an idea on the table, with each other, that's completely normal. We can disagree on interpretation, but the one thing we must never do is have disagreement on the facts when the facts are not in dispute. One of the indisputable facts is that there is substantial, very substantial, very substantial and fundamental departure from the advertised guidelines for the election. That's the first thing. Secondly, the violence, the rampant and wanton violence that was unleashed in Lagos State, in Rivers State, in Delta State, particularly in Maiduguri, where the Monday market was burnt and kept burning until Monday from Saturday, simply because the governor's party, Zulum's party, lost the election and he was enraged and the locals were attacked. No Nigerian press reported that. But it's a fact. Our campaign we have the pictures and the videos of what took place in Maiduguri on the 25th and 26th into the 27th. Violence was visited on people simply because they elected to vote for Peter Gregory Obi. And then some lawyer, some paid hack, forgetting the fact that when justice is lost, there can be no peace. We'll sit down and be finding some legalese to justify the horror that took place in place of election on Saturday, the 25th. There is a world of difference between voting and having an election. We voted, despite all of the constraints, but our votes have not been counted. And what has been announced is at complete variance with the reality, and it will not stand. So any lawyer can say whatever they care to say. We have had a situation in this country, in fact, scrap that. We've had situations in Nigeria where people have preached peace whilst ignoring the need for justice. But this one is way too fundamental, and it will not stand.
Dele, I thank you so much for your time on Ghana Tonight. And as indicated, your candidate is heading to the Supreme Court to challenge the results. We'll see how things play out in the coming days. But I appreciate your time staying up after midnight in Lagos to speak to us. Dele Farotimi is Nigeria-based lawyer, says he's retired now because of what happened there, and he speaks for the Labour Party, Peter Obi's party. Thank you. On behalf of the rest of the team, thank you so much for staying with us on Ghana Tonight. Join us same time tomorrow. I'm Alfred Okanse. Have a good night.